Electronic dance music and a solid body guitar from 1950 as a design. Will they be synonymous? Well, I think they will be. Now, we've got a lot of programmed stuff in electronic dance music. It's all drum machines, samples, sort of bass line played on a keyboard, that sort of thing, and uses a lot of loops as well, perhaps. So we need a little bit of a human element to go with this to make it sound individual. Don't forget the plugins. Most people that open a plugin on a computer use that sound and don't tweak it at all. So it's very easy to fall into the trap of sounding like someone else. Now, guitar, will it work? Let's have a look. So I've got my track, it's just drum machine, a bass line just staying in G with a little synth in G minor. So that's kind of what we've got. Just goes round and round like that. So it's a loop, it's just samples from GarageBand. With a guitar, we can get some realistic sort of sounds. Don't forget that even the best guitar plugins that you can get can't essentially emulate a player playing lots of different things, along with all the little bits and pieces, the niggly bits that actually make it sound human. So you can do chords, or you can do not lead lines, but counter lines. A word about the sound. I'm plugged straight into the front of an audio interface. I've used no guitar amp simulations or any effects at all, because actually your producer is going to want to be able to choose. Going to say, well, actually I quite fancy that guitar clean. If you listen to Prince records from the 80s, you can hear lots and lots of really clean guitar sounds, and they're just direct into the desk. No sort of guitar amps or anything like that. Of course, if you've got a guitar amp sound that's individual, great, use that, but you can't change it afterwards. Whereas with modern digital audio workstations, you can get any number of guitar processors that you can actually affect the guitar sound. So I'm going to do some chords first. Now that might be a little bit complicated, it might be getting in the way. It's also quite high in the mix. Don't forget, if you pull stuff back in the mix so that it only becomes evident when you take it away, that's kind of a nice level to work with when you're mixing guitar. Hammond organ is a classic like that. If you mute your Hammond organ, you think, oh, what's gone? And you bring it back again and you suddenly notice what instrument you have. That's quite a good rule of thumb when you're mixing something, because obviously we need to make sure that the top line, or if it's a bit of R&B, a bit of rap or whatever, has got to be prominent. So that was the chords that I used. Now, G minor. The chords that we got there, G minor, A minor, B flat, C, D minor and F, and then G minor. Those chords would work together to make a sort of moving chord structure within just that one chord. It's all based on the mode of G Dorian: G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F and G. So there's just one flat in there, that B flat. So any guitarist there, if you're using a keyboard, just make sure you use a B flat, and you can play a bit of keys as well. So if I was to do a line that had those notes in, something of that sort. It might be too complicated again. Now, if you are recording, and I've done a couple of sessions where I've worked for people who are making dance tracks, just putting some guitar lines down. Basically what I do is I give them 2-bar loops or 4-bar loops, usually presenting it as a complete take, and then they can splice what they need and, you know, have guitar parts that are working together or whatever it is you want. Now, we've got to be very careful that we don't play across a bar line. So if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and if you're bringing in a guitar sound that's a little bit before that bar line, of course that's going to get missed when you splice stuff. So you've got to be really, really specific with your timing. And also at the end of the loop, you've got to make sure that not only is it musically compatible with going back to the beginning of the loop, but it also doesn't get chopped off by the bar edit, or when you've got your snap open on the computer and you cut at a particular bar, you've got to make sure that there's no audio problems there. So something like this. So I recorded just a 2-bar loop there, but I made sure I started just after the bar line and finished just before. Of course, it depends on the rhythm, it depends on what you're playing. If you want to... If you have a constant line like that, you've got to be just very careful that it meets up with that bar line. Now, if you're strumming a chord on guitar, if it's a slow chord, of course the actual strum across the strings is going to come actually just slightly before the beat. So you've got to be a bit careful. Maybe on the computer, what you can do is you can cut the guitar sample so that it starts on beat 4.5, for example, so that you catch that strum. And then if you just got one strum for held for 4 bars, you would end that sample at the same place that you began it. So for beat 4.5 of the next 4.5 bar, for the next 4-bar phrase rather, which means that you've still got a 4-bar phrase, but the whole thing is offset back half a beat. And it just means you've got that nice strum there. And you cut at that point where I just pointed down. So you've cut that strum off at the end. It's naturally died off on the guitar anyway. So what you can do is you can do some sort of counter lines and some chords. Now, you don't want to go too low on the guitar because it's going to get hidden by that bass line. You really want sort of high stuff that's going to really, really just come out at you in the mix, albeit very low. Rhythm is absolutely important. It's so vital to get the timing right. Because what you can do with some guitar parts is you can chop them up and then bring them below each other and start panning stuff to have lots and lots of guitar work going on where it might have been split from one complete track. So if the timing isn't absolutely spot on, you're going to notice when it goes across the speakers. Of course, if you're editing a guitar sample and it's very sort of just full of bits, then you do have a certain amount of control to correct the timing, but that costs a lot of time. And actually, as a guitarist, if you're going into a studio and giving a producer some guitar loops, they're going to ask you back if they don't have to do lots and lots of processing work. So there we are, a bit of guitar on this Telecaster that can then essentially fit in on an EDM track.